Welcome back, everybody. So today's video, want to make it quite a quick one. Just wanted to briefly explain where I've been going with my photography journey of the last sort of year and a half, because I feel as though in that year and a half, a lot has changed for me in regards to photography. A lot of things that I thought were true has turned out to be untrue, and a lot of the preconceptions I had about things, I've kind of almost done a 180 on my perception of some of these issues. And I wanted to share these experiences and thoughts with yourself as a way of just kind of maybe a little bit of a confession of sorts, or maybe you can identify with some of this as well. So first of all, I'll just touch briefly on this idea of the Dunning-Kruger effect that you may or may have not heard of before. Let's see if we can find a quick definition of it somewhere on the internet. Okay, so it says here, Dunning-Kruger effect in psychology, a cognitive bias whereby people with limited knowledge or competence in a given intellectual or social domain greatly overestimate their own knowledge or competence in that domain relative to objective criteria or to the performance of their peers or of people in general. Okay. That means basically people talking out their ass, thinking they know what they're talking about, and they don't really know what they're talking about. And I'm guilty as charged of this, for sure. And I think it's an interesting one because, for example, when I first bought my Pentax K50 camera, this was an entry-level DSLR camera. I'd done enough reading about things to know that one of the first things I should do is make sure that I am shooting in RAW and not JPEG, because you pay all this money, right, for this camera. And you want to get the maximum benefit from the sensor, the ability to recover things well, and all those sorts of things. So I kind of almost thought, what's the point in JPEG? But I thought, okay, it's an entry-level camera, so it supports it. That's fine. And as things progress, I buy more expensive cameras, and now I'm spending $2,500 on a camera, and it still has it still shoots JPEG, and I'm kind of almost being arrogant and kind of thinking who would shoot JPEGs as on a camera like this. And it goes more than that, though. It also has like a full-on auto mode. Now I'm not talking about like just aperture priority mode. I'm talking about full automation of the camera. So a flagship camera, and they all do it in this day and age. You can spend like $6,000 on a Sony camera and it'll have an auto mode. So the camera is deciding your shutter speed, your aperture, and your ISO. It's controlling basically everything. And I always thought that this was a ridiculous option to have in a camera of this kind of expense, this kind of magnitude, this kind of level of camera. Something that maybe people who are learning photography might need. But I never really understood, a year and a half ago, why it kind of would exist on these kind of high-end cameras. And partly to do with this kind of rationale is this idea that I heard some arguments floating around that, if your camera settings are such and such and you see a moment quickly and you want to take that shot, then, you could just quickly go into auto mode and it'll help you get that shot. And I think it's also important to distinguish that not all auto modes are completely the same. You can specify some things like the ISO is going to be an auto ISO, for example, and you'll probably be able to set a kind of minimum shutter speed in that kind of auto ISO parameters and on these different camera models. Because at the end of the day, the camera's automation has to make a call. If you're shooting outside of plenty of light, what aperture is the camera going to choose for you? Is it going to choose you the aperture that's going to give you the optimum image quality, which might be sort of shooting the lens maybe about f5.6 or f8? Or is it going to know that there's an f1.4 lens here, and so you probably want to do something like portrait, and so it's going to do something like wide open and have a lot of bokeh and out of focus area. So not all automation is equal. I think we should just kind of touch upon that briefly, and that some cameras allow you with these auto modes to have a bias towards these sorts of preferences as to what you want. But at the end of the day, I was still quite snobbish about this idea of auto and not really needing to use it. And so my journey goes, and I end up buying a Fuji camera about a year and a half ago, and I start shooting and realize that these colors are really incredible straight in camera. And then I realized there's this whole thing called film sim recipes with websites producing, really interesting when you combine different settings in the camera for quality, JPEG quality, you get a real different plethora of different types of looks to the images, so much that you almost look like you've taken a shot and went through Lightroom or Photoshop already for an end result. I was quite impressed with them. So it's made me start thinking about this whole JPEG thing a lot, and I thought, well, maybe there is a reason for JPEG, because for sure, most of us that shoot RAW end up with a JPEG file later on. So everything ends up a JPEG anyway, and if you can get something nice in the camera, then what's the problem? I don't really see a problem. Maybe you don't need all that dynamic range. You don't need the sensor to be working as hard as it is for RAW. So the Fuji thing kind of rocked my whole system, my thought process on how, why we would have JPEGs. And then it wasn't until later on, as I was in the Fuji system and starting to research it, that I came across the I think he's now an XX brand ambassador for Fuji. I think his name's Kevin Mullins. He's a wedding a wedding documentary kind of photographer based in the UK, and he I was quite shocked to learn that he uses auto mode a lot of the time throughout the day of his weddings, and his work is just unbelievable. It's really, really fantastic quality of work here, and I liked what he said in one of his videos. I mean, I'm not saying he uses auto exclusively all throughout the day, but he did say in one of his videos how, his answer to some people like, why would you shoot auto? Like, how could you shoot auto? Why would you trust, the camera to get it right for you? And his comeback to that was, well, why wouldn't you trust this camera that you've invested into and it's priced accordingly to do a good job for you? And I thought that was quite a nice sort of kind of remark. And he feels as though being in auto mode allows him to stop fiddling around with settings and being in the moment, and those things ultimately matter a lot more on a day, something like a wedding day, than actually pissing about and fiddling around with settings of the camera and missing these moments that are unfolding in front of him. So it allows him, it's one more hurdle that he can remove on the day and concentrate a little bit more on the job, basically. And I just thought, after a year and a half with this system, and it's just funny. Just something I wanted to share. I just found it really interesting that I was kind of snobbish at one point about going like, why are we having auto modes on these high-end cameras? Why are they offering the options of shooting JPEG? That's ridiculous. Nobody should be doing that. We should, and I've just gone, my world's just gone upside down now, and I'm thinking, maybe I should be shooting auto a lot more. Maybe I should be shooting JPEGs a lot more. And it was just one of those kind of like the Dunning-Kruger thing ties in with it, because I just felt as though a little bit about a subject, you've been in it for 6 or 12 months or something, you think you know quite a lot, and you can start, helping people or giving advice. And as you stay on that journey and you start picking up other cameras and seeing how other things are working, you're opened up to more ideas and philosophies about photography that you maybe were not so aware of at the time. And so, I just thought it was interesting. That's really all this video is today. And I think that's where I feel like I've been put in my box, and, I should, be a little bit more open-minded. So when somebody tells me now that they shoot auto, instead of me making that automatic assumption that they are somehow a beginner or they don't know what they're doing, now I'm thinking that I can't make that jump or that connection, because there are professionals shooting in auto mode and their work is just, astounding, leaps above my own. So, and I thought that, I really just thought that was interesting. That's really the only point of this video. It's a very short one, like I said. It was just wondering maybe if I would share my thoughts and get some other people's comments and experiences about this kind of topic matter, and how many of you shoot auto. I'm not sure I could do it yet and go out and do my weddings and event work in full auto mode, but it is interesting as well, because the more you do things like shoot JPEG or auto, I think you have to be, and to produce a high level of work means that you have to be very good at photography as well. So it's like, to shoot JPEG and not RAW, which is another thing I think Kevin Mullins will do quite a lot in his wedding photography. He will work from the JPEGs on quite a few of the images he produces as well. And I do the same. I shoot JPEG and RAW, so that I've got the RAW there as a backup and as an alternative to interpretation of that image, different types of colors and things like that. But I think it is an interesting thing that when you do start to try and do things like shooting JPEG, you actually have to be more on your game than less. You have to make sure things like white balance are looking good at the time of the shoot, because it's harder to fix these things in post-processing. So nowadays, I started off thinking JPEGs were for the idiots, the people that don't know what they're doing, and people who are like, oh, I don't know what RAW is. I'm not going to put my camera to RAW. JPEG, that rings a bell. I think that's what I'm going to use, So I make this assumption that auto is for the raw beginners, the noobs, and so is JPEG. And I'm like, no. So actually, it's the other way around. JPEG can be for the very, very advanced photographers and shooters, and auto mode can also be for the very advanced photographers. I just thought that was really fascinating sort of revelation I've had over the last course of a year and a half. And of course, it's not concrete or gospel. You will still get excellent professional work from people shooting manual, aperture priority, shutter priority, whatever you like to use. But I just thought I would share my own headspace as to where I'm at with all of this right now. And I hope you found that useful. All right. Leave a comment below. Hit like, subscribe if you found this interesting. And yeah, look forward to hearing from you in the comments about all of this. Bye for now.